Hey, welcome back to Fox Eyes on the Hill Live this Sunday morning. Will Hunter Biden go to jail? He has been convicted in a felony gun case. Biden was recently found guilty of 3 violations of making false statements about a gun and his own drug use and owning that gun. Will his sentence be determined by a judge as he faces up to 25 years in prison? President Biden says he will not pardon his son or reduce his sentence. I want to welcome back in Belevetz. He is a former federal prosecutor and is currently a partner at the Ice Miller law firm and an adjunct law professor at William and Mary University. We got all the big law schools represented this morning. Tim, good to see you. This case has raised questions about whether or not, if his name was Hunter Smith, would this guy have been charged?
That's a good question, Tom. This is not an offense you see charged a lot. It's on the books. It is a federal offense to own a gun while you're a drug user, while you're an addict. But it's not the type of offense that the government is going to spend a lot of time and effort prosecuting.
It seemed pretty clear, though, that they were able to get a conviction on this. The jury only had it a short amount of time. So that is leading to the question, is he going to go to jail? What's the standard in this?
So he'll be sentenced at some point in time in the next few months. The judge, Mary Ellen Noriega, who's in the District of Delaware, she's in Wilmington, hasn't yet set a sentencing hearing. But typically the sentencing hearings go out about 120 days or so after the conviction, whether by way of a trial conviction or a guilty plea. Will he be sentenced? His guideline range, the federal sentencing guidelines are taken into account by sentencing judges, are 15 to 21 months in this case. As a first-time offender, however, he may not get any prison time. Could be straight probation.
What are the factors that a judge will use in making that consideration as to whether or not they do not get jail time or whether they do have to serve? So
in addition to sentencing guidelines, the judges take into account a whole series of sentencing factors that are set forth in the law. There are 7 or 8 general sentencing factors. Some of the things are the nature of the offense, the background of the defendant. In this particular case, I think the defense has some pretty good arguments. He's a first-time offender. He never used the gun, never even fired it. It wasn't used in a crime. He only had it for 11 days until his then-girlfriend, Hallie Biden, Beau Biden's widow, found it and threw it away.
One of the things that had come up on the timing on this, obviously, was it comes on the heels of Donald Trump's conviction on 34 felonies as well. Following that case, and during that case, Trump had railed against, the prosecution of him, saying that our criminal justice system was broken, that it was a rigged trial. There have, and I know you're not a political pundit, but you're a law professor, there have been some comments of late that the fact that Hunter Biden had been convicted in his separate federal trial somehow inoculates the Biden campaign against any of these kind of charges of the Trump prosecution, by the Manhattan district attorney, was somehow connected. What do people need to understand about what the case was in New York and what the case was in Delaware?
So the case in New York pertains to false business records, falsifying business records in order to hide transactions, to mischaracterize transactions. That's Donald Trump's case in New York. Hunter Biden's case in Delaware, of course, is filling out gun background forms incorrectly, lying on them. And then, of course, don't forget, Tom, he's got his tax trial coming up in Los Angeles in September, where Hunter's been charged with several tax counts, including felony tax counts, that relate to some unpaid taxes on some income he earned overseas several years ago.
But there are some differences also about the prosecution teams themselves as well. Can you explain that as well? What is the difference between Alvin Bragg and, say, the prosecutors in Wilmington?
Sure. So Alvin Bragg, as you mentioned earlier, is the Manhattan district attorney. He's a state prosecutor. He's not part of the federal system. He's not part of the Department of Justice. David Weiss, by contrast, is a federal prosecutor. He was the U.S. attorney for the District of Delaware, appointed by President Trump. He was then appointed by President Biden as the special counsel for purposes of these 2 Hunter Biden cases. So David Weiss will prosecuted the tax case in Wilmington, Delaware, and will also prosecute the tax offenses in Los Angeles in September.
One thing we have not heard following the Hunter Biden case that we did hear after the Trump case was immediately the Trump team had said that they were going to appeal that decision. Is there an avenue for that for Hunter Biden, and could there be an appeal of this conviction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think an appeal is 100% certainty. Look, after anyone's convicted by a trial of a crime in federal court or state court, the likelihood of an appeal is exceedingly high. There's always some error that came up during the course, an issue that came up during the course of the proceedings that defense counsel can rely upon as an appellate issue.
One of the things we know that because of some recent rulings, Donald Trump's other trials will most likely not proceed before the election. We will, as you said, have this tax case with Hunter Biden. How long will that go on?
The tax case, it's difficult to say. Tax cases can be complex. Here we're talking about unpaid taxes for, I believe it's 4 tax years, 2016 to 2019. That's the type of case, once you take into account the jury selection and getting in all of the witnesses, you might be looking at a couple of weeks. The gun case was 1 week. I can see the tax case going twice that long. Which
is significant because that would drag further into the presidential
That's
fall
right.
campaign as well. Tim Belevetz is a former federal prosecutor and former U.S. Attorney, Securities and Exchange Commission attorney. We thank you so much for your insight and analysis on all of this.